Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. It's now up to a joint legislative panel whether Congress makes trillions of dollars in spending cuts. The plan the U.S. House has approved involves $2 trillion in cuts. Most of it would come from savings in the Energy and Commerce Committee. It also extends the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Congress has until March 14th to pass a budget. House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that Congress might need to pass another continuing resolution if members can't reach a compromise in time. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Victoria Spartz voted for the House budget package after she opposed it for days. She says it won't lead to cuts in entitlement spending, and she is disputing reports President Donald Trump yelled at her over the phone before she changed her vote. She talked to our government reporter, Garrett Bergquist.
Let's bring in Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. Congresswoman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So you were a no on the budget deal up until at least a couple of days ago. What got you to yes?
Well, listen, I think, people look differently what budget instructions are. I've been here long enough, and I know usually at the ceiling, of the process, like in any contract, you make a deal, Senate make a deal, things only get worse, right? It's usually not the floor, and I understand that the Senate doesn't have any desire to govern, and unfortunately don't deal with reckless spending, that is destroying the country, and particularly in healthcare, which is not getting any better. So I wanted that instruction to be somewhat differently, and and the speaker was, convinced me that the things are going to get better, but I've seen this story before. But I'll be honest with you, I understand people do have intent. It's just very tough to govern, and we have lots of problems. But after my discussion with President Trump and really clarified the things and, and really understanding that he's on the page and he's going to help us with the Senate, I was very happy to see that. So we had a good conversations. I think, he personally is on board to help us to deliver, and he means it. And he's the only president who can do it.
So you were one of several members of Congress who President Trump personally lobbied prior to the vote on the budget bill. Tell me a little bit more about how that conversation went.
Well, listen, I don't disclose private conversation, but definitely some people telling lies. Oh, okay, scream at me, President Trump. First of all, he never screamed at me in his life. We actually have very productive conversation. He is a businessman and businesswoman. He's very respected of a lot of things, and he's a normal person you can talk with, actually. And he understands and pays attention. This is something unique about it. A lot of politicians here, they just hear what lobbyists or their staff say. He's actually pays attention and he cares about delivering. We always had very productive conversation. He gets a lot of things way more than people hear, and he cares enough. So I think, he agrees with me on big issues. And I know how tough it is. There are some of these issues that actually President Obama tried to do and Vice President Biden and couldn't accomplish because the lobby is so strong. But he's willing to fight for the people. That was very refreshing. I want to make sure that we're on the same page, and he was very good, so very, very good conversations I had with him.
Will there be cuts to Medicaid?
Listen, we're not going to be cutting any benefits on anything. What we need to do is cut waste, fraud, and abuse. It's out of control. We need to save programs. We need to make sure that Medicaid is good for the people with disability because they're losing a lot of services. We need to make sure that our seniors get good Medicare that going bankrupt. For some reason, everyone get less services, but prices are doubling spending per person in prices. How is that happening? Why we keep spending more and more money? More and more money, and everyone is going bankrupt. Federal government get bankrupt, and we get less and less money. Indiana is one of the worst in the country in price of healthcare, lowest paid doctors and nurses, and some of the worst outcomes. We have to deal with that. It's becoming money laundering operations. We have lots of Taj Mahals, money on Wall Street, a lot of executives of large monopolies, including hospitals, making a lot of money, but people are not getting healthy. That has to stop.
So I want to be clear, if a final budget deal included cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, you'd be no?
I'm trying to spin my words. We're going after fraud abuse. We're going to save this program. So just don't try to spread the lies, because if we do nothing, we're going to lose this program's promise to seniors. We need to make sure that the value of healthcare goes to seniors. They're not getting defrauded by some Medicare Advantage. that a lot of the seniors are able to receive the proper services. We keep spending money and they go to Taj Mahal, overbilling Medicare. We have hospital purchasing doctor practices, and for the same service, they bill, like it's performed on the main campus, $160 billion to hit Medicare. How is that not defrauding the taxpayer and seniors? We have them cooking the books, showing fake losses, so they can be non-for-profit, taxes them not paying taxes. But look at much on 990s, how much cash they sit in there in Wall Street. That's why Chuck Schumer is protecting them, and they're doing all funding for Democrats. So they're spreading lies on purpose and going to spread more. And this program's now not working well for people that go bankrupt them. So we're going after fraud, wasted abuse, and the magnitude of it became so material that when people see that, it will open their eyes and make sure that these programs have competition for value, better doctor access, especially in rural areas, and have better price and services for the people that program's meant to be.
That brings me to one of my next questions, and that is Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency. We have seen some protests here in Indiana and across the country against his influence. The protesters briefly have basically accused him of being something of an unelected president, and they've accused him of making these cuts recklessly without first looking into how eliminating certain services would impact the people who use them. How do you respond to those criticisms?
And I think, he was the first real auditor of our government. So we need to have better auditors. They need to get meanwhile. They can do a better job even than he does. They're going to really get in trouble if I start auditing them. Someday when I have a little bit more time, now I have to do the laws here. But people have seen where the money is spent. He brought his transparency, and a lot of people are upset because there's a lot of money made in waste, fraud, and abuse by people that don't deliver value. But ultimately, all of the things have to be done in Congress, and that's why it's important. All of this, defrauding the taxpayer, the programs that are bad, has to go through Congress, then it will have a more permanent effect.
Is it wise to leave tax cuts in place when we're already $36 trillion in debt?
Well, I think what President Trump is trying to do, he's trying to have, because a lot of these tax cuts go to small businesses. So he wants to make sure, which is going to really hurt right now by big government. So he wants to make sure that these tax cuts for small businesses, which will grow the economy, are still in place, that people don't have tax increases. Another part, he's very concerned. There are a lot of people on fixed income, lower income people that get hurt a lot by inflation in the economy. So he wants to make sure that these people have at least some opportunity to have more money, because this is a challenge. We had spent so much money now, drove inflation, and we need to get it under control. So we try to balance it, that we have a balance in the economy, but also deal with some reckless spending, because we cannot decrease taxes, and increase expenditure. So that's why we try to level it out, and then start looking how we can generate more growth through deregulation. So we start paying down all of this debt, because we are in deep trouble. I want to give you an example. In 2019, our total spending was $4.5 trillion. Under Speaker Pelosi, we still continue. It jumped to $7. Just think this jump. This is a huge jump, and it's bloated with corruption, because it sits a lot of it in mandatory spending that Congress never look at it, because 85% of spending never looked by Congress.
All right, coming up, an Indiana senator pushes for better storm warnings. We'll tell you how coming up. All right, welcome back. The General Assembly returns to the Statehouse tomorrow for the second half of the legislative session. Now, the leader of the Indiana ACLU says he's concerned by some of the bills working their way through the legislature. Our Kody Fisher explains what the ACLU plans to do if the bills pass.
Right now, the ACLU has two main areas of concern when it comes to a handful of laws, saying some are creating a surveillance state, while others are imposing statewide control over decisions that cities and towns should handle. The ACLU says bills like SB 289 that eliminates DEI programs and SB 442 that requires school boards to approve and post curriculum on human sexuality are examples of how state government is overstepping and taking away local control over those issues.
We see it as one that is now starting to encroach in every aspect of Hoosiers' lives. This doubling down by the state legislature on big government, one-size-fits-all mandates is something that we think is a way for them to continue to spread what we think are unconstitutional policies.
The ACLU is equally concerned about bills they say create more of a surveillance state.
Some laws, some bills that are coming out of the General Assembly turn individual Hoosiers into people surveilling whether or not state agencies, higher ed, K through 12 schools are in compliance with state law.
On Tuesday, Governor Braun defended his administration's legislative agenda, saying it's what Hoosiers wanted.
When Hoosiers elected me, I made it clear that this wasn't going to be business as usual. I'm here to do one thing, get results for Hoosiers.
The ACLU said they would consider challenging the legislation if it is passed and becomes law. For ITMate, I'm Kody Fisher for Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook for updates.
Meanwhile, back in Washington, Senator Todd Young is pushing for better storm warnings. Young is again co-sponsoring the Tornado Act. Among other things, NOAA would need to identify and either change or get rid of confusing terminology. The agency would have to incorporate behavioral science into any new warning systems and take into account the needs of vulnerable populations.
One of the things that I know Hoosiers expect of their federal government is that it keeps us safe and secure. There are many things that our government does that people don't like and think they should stay out of, but protecting local communities from inbound tornadoes is certainly something that I think everyone would agree is a proper role of government.
So far, the Tornado Act has not gotten a hearing. Young co-sponsored similar legislation in the last Congress, but it never got a floor vote. Coming up, Indiana's best political team takes on the congressional budget deal and looks ahead to the second half of the session. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Lindsay Haake. Good to see you both. Let's begin with the congressional budget deal. We just heard from Congresswoman Spartz, who says the final deal will not touch benefits like Medicaid. Lindsay, do you buy that?
No, I sure don't, because an $880 billion cut to Medicaid is simply an affront on disabled and poor Hoosiers. And unfortunately for Congresswoman Spartz, and I think she's going to find herself in a little bit of hot water this weekend for more than just these comments, you know, fraud, waste, and abuse, it's theater. With Congress continuing to reject real solutions that will bring basic services to Hoosiers that need it, like medically complex families. This is not luxury concierge healthcare. These are basic services, and this is a real affront to those who are sadly the most medically vulnerable among us.
Whitley, is it even feasible to bring down $36 trillion worth of debt without touching entitlements?
I absolutely think it's possible, because what we've been able to witness through DOGE is that there's been a lot of frivolous spending, specifically within our federal government. And if we're able to get a hold of that frivolous spending, we'll not only be able to make those cuts reduce the deficit, but potentially even give money back to everyday citizens who've been paying into this program. And the truth is you have to get along in Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to be able to pass some of these bills and some of these laws. So if the Democrats want Medicaid to stay on the table and you have Republicans in allyship of that, why wouldn't you be congratulating them and looking for more allies on that side as opposed to lambasting them?
Let's remain on that topic for a moment, okay? Congressional Republicans have vowed to extend the 2017 tax cuts. Those are set to expire later this year. Whitley, is it wise to cut revenues like that if we want to reduce our debt and deficit?
I think that something has to be done specifically when it comes to tax cuts. I think that we have been overtaxed consistently. And I don't just mean from a federal level, I also mean from a state level. So finding other ways to get resources and revenue, not only into the federal government, but the state government, and reducing the burden that is placed specifically on citizens is important. That could be shifting it to corporations. That could be also shifting it to other countries that are doing trade, doing whatever is necessary to lift the burden on citizens and transfer it to other people while also saving us money.
Lindsay, your thoughts? What do you make of the argument that is in favor of extending tax cuts?
in 2017, Republicans added $2 trillion worth of national debt to our figures, and unfortunately, this is only going to extend that. This year, they're doubling down with $4 trillion in national debt spending, and they're just doing it for billionaires. These are for the top 1%, and Hoosiers like you and me are just going to be left hanging with nothing at home and raising utility bills thanks to the legislature, and I just don't know how folks are going to afford it.
All right, well, we'll see what happens with that. Let's turn our attention now to the second half of the legislative session. Okay, lawmakers will return to work on Monday. As you very well know, the property tax plan is now in the House's plans. As a reminder, the Senate passed the scaled-down version. Governor Mike Braun says that he would veto it. Whitley, let's go back to you on this one. Do you expect the House will cut it closer to the Senate's version or Braun's original plan?
I think that they're probably going to meet in the middle with a little bit more leaning towards Braun's plan, because I think that there are some serious concerns that a lot of the legislators are having with this bill. At the same time, you want to help the agenda of the current administration and the current governor. So I do think that the legislators will lean more towards what Braun would like, while also staying true and making sure that some of the issues that the constituents have brought up are have resonance specifically within this bill. I think that there's going to be some common ground for both sides to come together on this one.
Lindsay, I'd like to get your prediction on that as well, but also Braun basically has said, as you know, local services must take a back seat to homeowners' financial well-being. So what do you make of that argument?
That's pretty tough to bear for lots of first responders back home who are dependent upon this funding and proper property taxation funding to essentially give Hoosiers services, basic human services that Hoosiers need every day. And so you have a lot of folks mad at you as legislators and also the governor, but the governor's feeling incredible pressure. I really can't imagine being in his position. He was under so much pressure that his PAC decided to send out some really nasty digital ads against other Republicans in the legislature saying they're not doing enough for property tax relief. But the sad thing is, while they're doing this, having this whole conversation about property tax relief, there's a giant utility bill increase on the table too, and no one's talking about it. It's House Bill 1007, and it's going to increase folks just to give subsidies to nuclear small modular reactor companies at behest of lobbyists in DC. So it's really unfortunate this is happening, because property taxation is going to hit really hard with up to $130 million worth of hits to Marion County alone.
Well, Lindsay, that tees me up for our next question. I don't want to interrupt, but what else are you looking at for the second half of the session?
Absolutely. I'm really concerned about the Medicaid scenario, even with some of the legislation moving through the House right now. House Bill 1689 will seek to give some relief to families who are medically complex, but there's also still this uncertainty that will hit folks if this budget funding deal does in fact go over to the Senate and get passed as is. It will absolutely decimate care for medically vulnerable and complex Hoosiers, and that's a real bad thing. But also Senate Bill 284, I want to give some props to the Senate. They killed this bill. They did not hear it on the calendar last week. It would have completely cut in half the amount of early voting that we have in Indiana. And Senate Bill 284 went right in the trash, and I hope it stays there.
I want to get Whitley in here too. Whitley, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the session being over at this point. I think that there have been a lot of bills that have come up and people have been enraged and other people have been engaged about it. But this is a part of the process. This is what democracy looks like. And so being able to sit and say, hey, I like this bill, I don't like this bill, I'm testifying for or against, or I'm calling those in positions of power as a constituent is where our power lies. And so the fact that we have robust conversation about property taxes, about education, about voting rights, extending or decreasing the time that polls are going to be able to be open is what democracy is about. So I'm excited that we're even just having the conversation and able to engage in this way. And I will be excited to see how all of this pairs with Mike Braun's overall administration and his goals that he set forth in the state of the state.
All right, well, we will all be keeping a close eye on it. We still have some time left. Thank you so much for joining us once again, and we will be right back. All right, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. Be sure to tune in at 9 p.m. this Tuesday for our live coverage of President Trump's address to Congress. Have a great rest of your weekend.